Were any of you among the millions who were waiting on tenterhooks just over a week ago for the return of something? If you were, you probably already know what I'm talking about. The start of the latest series of Line of Duty on the BBC. There was still a lot of loose ends remaining at the end of the last series, and on social media the excitement was mounting as the day drew near. Nowadays it's generally possible to binge on a television series, and you can watch episode after episode straight away if you want, as streaming services often have the whole series available before you start. We're getting back to old-fashioned television with Line of Duty, and having watched episode 1 last Sunday, we had a whole week to wait to find out what's going to happen next. This week we've started another period of waiting in our house. We have planted some seeds. We were partly inspired by a fabulous film we watched a couple of weeks ago on the BBC iPlayer called This Beautiful Fantastic. I won't say any more about the film other than that gardens and seeds are very significant. However, I would encourage you to watch it if you're in the mood for something beautiful and gentle and inspirational. Alongside that film, we were also discussing the fact that you don't seem to find people growing things from seed as much as you did when we were children. We wondered if that signifies a decrease in humanity's capacity for patience more broadly. Who wants to wait for seeds to grow when you can go to a garden centre and buy something that's already a decent size? We're as guilty of this as anyone else. Buying something that is already visibly growing also takes some of the risk out of the enterprise. Unless something goes wrong, you can more or less guarantee that your plant will survive. None of this looking optimistically at a patch of bare soil and wondering what's going on under the surface and hoping that one day soon you will see signs of life beginning to emerge. Let someone else do the waiting for you. We did plant some beans and radishes from seed in the garden last year during the first lockdown. But this year we're going a bit further, and the propagators are already taking over the sunny end of the utility room. I'm currently resisting the temptation to keep taking the lid off and have a look to see if there are shoots beginning to poke through. This is another exciting time of waiting, of searching for signs of growth and the promise of good things to come. As I was preparing this, it's Palm Sunday, the start of Holy Week, which is a period of time that I always find difficult. The waiting of Holy Week is not for me about excitement mounting. In some ways it's something that I want to put off for as long as possible, and I shy away from it. This time last year I wrote about the pain that I fear is coming and my attempts to shield myself from it. If I switch off emotionally early enough, I might be able to insulate myself from all of that. Do what I need to do and hope I can keep a lid on everything else. For the same reason, I find the waiting of Lent so much harder to engage with than the waiting of Advent. And so perhaps my excitement about Easter Sunday is slightly more measured, as I'm generally simply relieved to have survived Holy Week. I often find that for me the joy of Easter comes a bit later on, sometimes by lunchtime on Easter Sunday, but often not for another day or two or longer. Certainly at this stage of Holy Week, I find that I'm already bracing myself for Good Friday, already trying to protect my vulnerabilities and manage the expectations that everybody has of a minister at this time of year. If I could, I would be tempted to skip forward in time, to try and fast forward through Holy Week so that the hard part, the suffering and struggle and ultimately the death, are over and done with as quickly as possible. One morning recently, I attended an online seminar led by the theologian Dr. Nicholas Lee, called Living, Working and Praying as Women in Liminal Times. She described the period of time we perhaps find ourselves in now, going through a third lockdown, not sure what life will be like afterwards, as a bit like the day after Good Friday. Jesus was in the tomb and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The women who wanted to go and prepare his body properly for burial were unable to, because the Saturday was the Sabbath. There was nothing they could do but wait. They couldn't skip ahead, putting aside their grief, to the point where they discovered that the tomb was empty and Jesus was alive. They had to wait. There were no shortcuts. They were in a liminal period an in-between time, a threshold moment, and they had to be prepared to wait. I might want to race ahead and get through this in-between week, but I know that I can't, and I also know that I shouldn't, that there will be blessings and comforts and challenges and lessons to be learned in the waiting, if I'm prepared not to ignore it, but to give it due attention. But that's hard. There is a book by Susan Beaumont called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. It was actually published in September 2019, before any of us knew about COVID-19 or lockdowns, but it is perhaps particularly applicable to us in our current context. The blurb says this: how do you lead an organisation stuck between an ending and a new beginning, when the old way of doing things no longer works, but a way forward is not yet clear? Beaumont calls such in-between times liminal seasons, threshold times when the continuity of tradition disintegrates and uncertainty about the future fuels doubt and chaos. In a liminal season, it simply is not helpful to pretend we understand what needs to happen next. But leaders can still lead. How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going is a practical book of hope for tired and weary leaders who risk defining this era of ministry in terms of failure or loss. It helps leaders stand firm in a disoriented state, learning from their mistakes and leading despite the confusion. Packed with rich stories and real-world examples, Beaumont guides the reader through practices that connect the soul of the leader with the soul of the institution. If we're to navigate these liminal times, Susan Beaumont points out that we will need to hold steady and be prepared to wait for the way forward to emerge. This is not a time for problem solving, she says, but this doesn't mean that we do nothing. In the meantime, we, the church, can deepen our communal discernment about what God would have us do. We can shape our institutional memory by telling and owning our story. We can clarify our purpose, asking who we are, who we serve, and what God is calling us to be next. We can be ready to see the way forward gradually emerge out of the chaos of the passing of the old ways. As I think about Holy Week in the light of these things, I think that they can help me navigate this in-between period. I need to hold steady and be prepared to wait, taking deep breaths and moving forward as slowly and tentatively as I feel I'm able to. Moving forward doesn't mean trying to bypass the difficult time or to run through it in the hope that I emerge unscathed. It does mean waiting and listening and learning, and only thinking about one small step at a time. While I wait, I can be praying and seeking what God is asking of me. Who does God want me to be, and what, if anything, does God want me to do? And I can think about my own story in the light of the ongoing story of Jesus, of which I'm a part. And I can try to be ready to be called out of darkness into God's marvellous light. As I step into this week with great trepidation, I'm aware that without the pain, the joy would be diminished. Without Jesus' death, resurrection would not have been possible. Without the willingness of the early followers of Jesus to wait and seek guidance and receive power to equip them for what lay ahead, none of us would know Jesus today. There is virtue and blessing in the waiting. So I'm waiting for the next episode of Line of Duty tonight, and I'm waiting for our seeds to begin to grow. And most of all, I'm waiting for the touch of the Holy Spirit this week to hold me and guide me and show me something new about death and resurrection, something new about myself, something new about living in the in-between. One day, maybe I'll even learn to love and cherish the waiting times. But I'm not there yet. I'm still waiting for that one to happen. And who knows how long that's going to take.